You are tuning into the Lehigh Low Ego, High Impact Mindset podcast. I'm your host, Volkan Emre, along with a dynamic team of Kellogg School of Management alums. We are here on a shared mission to uncover the mindset that drives impact and success. On Lehigh, we have thought-provoking conversations with incredibly successful entrepreneurs, business leaders, and investors from around the globe. We uncover the mindset that drives them, allowing them to make a high impact without losing themselves to ego. Now, let's get started with today's episode. I also started that. Eileen, thank you very much for being on the Lehigh Mindset podcast. Today, I have the privilege to host Kinshuk in my house in St. Paul, Minnesota for this podcast. Kinshuk is a friend from Kellogg Executive MBA program, and then we also recorded an episode earlier too. He's a distinguished... I forgot your profession. Sorry, you're a distinguished. I'm sorry.
I'm a neurologist.
You're a distinguished neurologist. I'm so sorry. Okay, yeah, Kinshuk is a distinguished neurologist, and it's an honor to have you here. Eileen, we have rapid fire questions to get us all warmed up, and we will be firing them away one by one. If you are ready.
Sure. Yeah. All set.
Let me start, Kinshuk. Eileen. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Dogs or cats?
I like them both, but I have to say cats.
Oh, do you have a cat or cats? Did you have one?
I have. I don't currently.
Oh, nice.
Always
I'm sorry,
have had
I'm
cats,
judging you. I love dogs, so...
No, I've always had dogs and cats.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will say. But for apartment living, I go with cats.
Apartment living cats are amazing. Yeah. Mountains or beaches?
I think mountains.
Mountains.
Text or call?
Text.
I'm there with you.
Music or podcasts?
I have to say both. Mostly music, but I listen to a lot of podcasts.
Nice. Oh, that's great.
PC or Mac?
PC.
Drive or fly?
Fly.
Okay.
I don't have a car, so
okay. Wow.
Well, you live in Chicago, so I'm guessing...
It's fly or walk or public transportation.
I see.
I didn't know that you didn't have a car, but that makes sense. What's worse?
I do drive. I just don't need a car, so I don't have one.
What's worse, dishes or laundry?
Oh, laundry, I guess.
Actually, very common answer. Most of the people, I will say why. Like, I'm really super curious to learn that. Why do you think laundry is worse than dishes?
I think it's just the extra steps. You gotta fold it, put it away, iron it.
Okay.
There with you.
What's the first app you open up in the morning?
Probably my WBEZ radio app.
Oh.
I put the news on first thing in the morning usually. I try not to open my email right away.
Wow, that's amazing. Great. Well, thanks for the rapid fire question session. I think can you start by giving our listeners a brief introduction to your background and your journey becoming the CEO of AES? Sure.
So I did not start out in association management work. I was, and I'll probably touch on this a little later too in some of the other questions. I was a art and ancient Near Eastern studies and English major in college. And then I actually worked on my master's in art history. And when I finished that, I started work at the Museum of Science and Industry in their development area. And I found out that I actually liked that a lot. So sort of took a detour. I was in a museum, but I was mostly doing fundraising and events. And then my first job in associations was with the American Bar Association. I worked in membership marketing. And so it was a good position. I really enjoyed it a lot. I left there and went back into the arts, but I was executive director for a community arts center. So again, I was doing fundraising. And when I left there, I chose to go back to association work. And that was when I entered into medical societies. But I stayed in fundraising. I was doing mostly corporate giving until I got to the Health Information Management Association. I was head of their foundation, and that kind of gave me an entree to do more program-related work. And then from there, I went to the Academy of Dermatology, where I was the associate executive director. So I was responsible for all of the programming areas. So meetings, education, development, communications, research. And then I was interim CEO there for a year, and then I came to AES. So kind of a little bit of a convoluted path. Wasn't a chosen path, but it made sense once I started on it. So
yeah, it sounds very exciting, and I'm very curious whether you could name a sliding door moment in your career that changed the trajectory of your professional journey.
Well, I think there were sort of two. One was very straightforward. When I finished my master's in art history, I actually was offered a position at the Art Institute in an area that had nothing to do with anything I had studied, for a really, really bad salary. This was a long time ago, but for a very, very low salary. And the curator sounded so discouraging about the opportunity that that's when I sort of veered off from let's, try something else. And that's how I ended up at the Museum of Science and Industry and fundraising. So that really was a change. And then I think the other was when I started as the associate ED at the Academy of Dermatology. I thought what I wanted to do was more COO work. I thought, program operations, much more hands-on. And my boss there, Ron Henricks, who is the CEO, started talking to me about whether I might want to be a CEO at some point. I kept saying, no, I don't want to do that. And so he suggested that I work with an executive coach, mostly to figure out, because he very firmly believed that I should be a CEO and that I'd like it. And so that was the other where I worked with a great coach, and we had a couple of sessions talking about just my general career trajectory and what I might like to do. And after 2 sessions, she said, yeah, you want to be a CEO. So that's what it took to sort of convince me that maybe that was the right path for me.
Quite interesting.
So those are probably the two times that really set me in the direction. Yeah.
As an association management leader, what is the biggest challenge that you have faced? And I'm sure there are several, but which one or two maybe stand out? And could you overcome them or it? Mm-hmm. And if yes, how?
It's interesting. I thought a lot about this one, and I didn't have an immediate answer. Not that there haven't been plenty of challenges. I think, certainly when I started with AES, the organization had been with a management company for a very, very long time, for more than 25 years, which is just a different model. I mean, you have shared staff that work with an association management company. They'd had the same CEO. A fabulous person, but they'd had the same CEO for almost 20 something years. And so I think the biggest challenge was that when I started there, when I started as the directly hired executive director at the time, for AES, I was working with all the other staff were employees of the management company. So that was a lot of people management and, just kind of working through getting the work done that had to be done and moving the organization forward when there were just these fairly persistent challenges in making some significant changes. And so I think just helping people through those kinds of choices, I think that's always hard. And then we made the decision that we should become an independent organization. So of course that comes then with, cutting the ties with the other organization and some hiring. I had to hire almost every staff person in the space of 6 months, and establish the organization as an independent organization on a pretty short turnaround. So That was challenging. I think it was fun. Overcoming it was really just being very persistent and thoughtful about what we needed to do, being comfortable with the fact that everybody wasn't comfortable. Knowing that I had the support of our board and our member leaders in making that change. So I think that helps. Is you're not kind of fighting the tide in all directions at the same time.
So thank you very much for the details. Actually, along the lines, you mentioned that you got some executive coaching at some point. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, over the course of your career, on top of like that short engagements, like have you had a mentor you work with? Mm-hmm. And what impact, if yes, like what type of an impact like you got from it?
I've had several mentors, all of whom have been tremendous. I mean, my very first job at the Museum of Science and Industry, that was my first full-time job. And I worked with a woman who had been there for over 45 years, wow. And who, frankly, really took me under her wing. I mean, she was very, she recognized that I was enthused about what I was doing. And really helped me learn how to do the job. And I think also how to determine my sort of professional standing. I mean, I was a college kid and I looked like a college kid and I acted like a college kid. And she was really very, very helpful in kind of saying, you're young for this job. I got promoted a couple of times very quickly. And she was just very frank and saying, hey, you're a lot younger than the other people in these positions, so you need to do extra to really prove yourself. So she was fabulous, and she really let me learn a lot. And then I mentioned Ron Hendricks, who was the CEO at the American Academy of Dermatology, and I also say Linda Kloss, who was the CEO at AHIMA when I was there. Both were tremendously supportive and encouraging and willing to give me new challenges and, be there to support me, but really let me figure things out on my own, which was great. I think giving me free rein to kind of explore the possibilities for my role. So I think in both cases, they were very instrumental in supporting me in both my job with them and in encouraging me to move on to the next thing up.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. And when it comes to giving mentorship to others, mm-hmm. like is there an experience that you may want to share with us?
Yeah, I've done both mentoring of my own team members. As well as in a couple of instances, mentored others who, I had a colleague who asked me to mentor his daughter. She wanted to go into association work. And he said, I'm her father. I could tell her a lot about association work, but it would be better if she had somebody that, not me. So I think that's part of my responsibility as a particularly as a female CEO, is to, help others develop, help them learn their job, support them, and, be willing to have frank conversations about the pluses and minuses of roles and the kinds of things that they'll encounter and the things that they need to learn. I think especially as people move up in their careers, it's not the sort of tactical stuff that you need to know. People know how to do the job, but it's learning, the emotional intelligence and the people skills and the sort of political savvy and the, all of those things that are a little bit harder, and where I think it's really helpful to have someone kind of pointing out and coaching you along the way. And I found that really... and it really benefits me as well. I mean, I think, hearing their perspectives, especially as I've gotten more senior in the field, you get further away from when you were in their shoes. and things have changed a lot for the better as well as for the worse. So I think, keeping your own finger on the pulse of how people are experiencing the workplace in the earlier and middle stages of their career helps me as a CEO as well, just to be continually aware, that their experience is very different than mine.
Thanks for sharing that. For association work, the professional field, what is your vision of the future? I mean, a lot of things are changing and we keep talking about all these new challenges all over. But what do you think is the vision, and what concerns you, or what are the barriers or things that will keep you awake at night about this field?
I think the continuing need to be very strategic and to see the big picture and not get caught up just in the sort of churning out the work. I've never worked for a trade association, so there are differences there certainly, but in professional associations, I think really understanding what your members are going through and what their career stressors are and their professional needs are, again, not getting too bogged down in the day-to-day details. I think as a CEO and as more senior executives is to really keep your eye on the big picture. I also find it important to not always listen to what people say everybody's doing, or this is the trend, or you have to do X. I think you start to learn that there's a lot of reasons why people advocate doing certain things a certain way. I mean, I remember someone saying probably 25 years ago that live meetings were going away. Everything was going to be virtual. And it's like, even after we went through COVID, everything is not virtual. And I think really paying attention to what your constituents want and need. And just because somebody's poll says that 80% of people in associations like X, if you know that your members don't, that's who you need to be paying attention to. Not what everybody else says, but what you're actually seeing people do and say. So I think that kind of just that constant attention to people, honestly, that's what associations are.
Nice. So that was a very smooth segue, which wasn't planned, into the next question. And I have kind of seen how you navigated the society and association through the pandemic, and did it very skillfully. What lesson or lessons did you personally learn from the whole experience in the association work?
I think I was astonished at what we were able to do, frankly. I mean, we were lucky in that because our meeting is in December, we only had one completely virtual meeting. There are many societies who had spring meetings where they had to do it twice, and that would have been hard. It was a huge lift. I think, having really good committed staff made a huge difference. I think also understanding our limitations and what we could do successfully, and not getting sucked into kind of all the bells and whistles and fancy things that are possible in the virtual world, and just really staying focused on the content. And I think that's also what's helped us come through it. Is we did one hybrid meeting where we had partly in person, partly recorded, and then we went back to pretty much, we still record sessions, we always have, but I think kind of holding the line with what we knew was the right thing to do, and staying focused on delivering really great content and a really good in-person experience allowed us to move forward. So I think my takeaway from that is just that the people connections matter, the human connections. And that's everything from supporting your staff team when they have to go through a year that is hugely disruptive. I think it's the one thing I worry about coming back in post-pandemic is we've continued to be flexible and allow lots of work from home and things like that, that it's still important to get people in the office together, to meet with your members in person. There are some things that happen that way that you just can't replace with the virtual environment. As wonderful as that can be, and as helpful as it is in reaching a broader audience and lots of other good reasons. But so I think that was probably my biggest takeaway, is that connecting matters, and that there is not really a real replacement for in person.
I completely agree, and there are so many situations and day-to-day practices that we see that virtual fills a lot of important areas, but you need in person as well. Now, in a separate conversation we have had before, you mentioned that you had taken a Briggs-Myers assessment, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
And the personality assessment that came out was very different for your suitable chosen field in fundraising. Right. and this is part of a lot of us. The assessments are done quite regularly. Even we did it as part of the Kellogg course. How did you take that assessment? Did you feel it was a barrier that you had to overcome, or an opportunity? And how were you able to leverage or overcome what you faced at that time?
I chose to see it as an opportunity. I am an extreme introvert on Myers-Briggs, consistently, since the first time I took it 30 years ago. I am absolutely off the charts introvert. So I think one was understanding what that really means, which is not that I'm shy or that I don't like to talk to people, or, it just means I can only do it for so long. At the time when I was primarily in fundraising, I was in a room full of about 45 others, and we all took it. And I was one of only two people that was a very strong I. And the person leading the session was like, well, you might want to rethink this. And I thought, well, not really, because if you work, I was doing a lot of work in major gifts and large donor. That's a one-on-one relationship. And I'm good at that. Introverts are good at that. It's not that we're not people. We're good at the one-on-one and at having, I think really meaningful, deep conversations. We're not good at the sort of surface stuff. And that's not really what you need if that's the kind of work you're doing. So I think that, to me, that was an advantage. I didn't, I had a moment of thinking, oh, maybe I did make a bad choice here. But I think it was an advantage over time, and I still think it is. I tend to make very deliberate decisions. I tell my staff I need time to think about stuff. So unless it's really a true hair on fire emergency, you're going to wait 24 hours for me to tell you what I think. And I think that's good. I think we need both, obviously, but I chose to see it as a plus. And it also makes me sensitive. I think, frankly, I do think our world is very geared around extroverts. So I find that it also is helpful to understand other introverts and to be thinking about, how certain kinds of environments work better for people. I might have shared this with you, that we do the mentoring breakfast with our early career researchers, and we let them pick topics. And the most popular topic, we had 2 tables for introverts. So I felt vindicated. Apparently, a lot of our basic scientists are introverts.
I would say that I too am an introvert, but I overcompensate for it in professional settings. So, but I completely hear and agree with what you're saying is that introverts have a different way, and if you are an introvert yourself, when you come across another one, you know that the other person needs time.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a fast-flowing conversation, and that you imagine. Which works out very well.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think I'm a flat out extrovert.
Shocking.
But But I will never honestly tell that you would identify yourself, Kinshuk, as an introvert. It kind of is surprising to me. We can definitely have a conversation about it later.
I hide it very well.
So we are planning to.
Well, I think the key. So right there, it's like you shouldn't have to hide it, and that's part of the issue. Is it's all there's a bit of the introvert bad, extrovert good thing that happens still, because I think more people are extroverted. My real takeaway, and I had my boss at my previous job was very much like me. It's not that you can't do all the social stuff and it's just it exhausts you at some point. You need the downtime.
At the end of the day,
It's not you don't get your energy from other people. You get your energy from ideas and from thinking and from I shared that when I interviewed for the position at the Art Institute, one of the things the curator said was, you're going to be in the basement in a little room doing research. I was like, cool. And I think he was telling me because probably everyone else in that job had been like, ew.
Yeah.
So there are pluses.
So wonderful, really great insights. And thank you very much for opening this topic up. This is really amazing. Eileen, I'm curious about the decisions that led you to Kellogg and what type of Kellogg, what impact Kellogg had on your professional and personal life.
So I went back. Like I said, I had a degree in art history. I didn't take any business classes when I was in college. It just wasn't on my radar. So I recognized that regardless of what I was learning on the job, that at some point there would be an expectation. Most people in my field had MBAs of some sort. So there was just a very practical, I should probably do that. I looked at schools that had nonprofit management as a track, and Kellogg was one that did. I also had been at the University of Chicago for my art history degree, and it wasn't my environment. So I was looking for something different, and Kellogg and Northwestern seemed like a really good fit for me. So, and it was. And I think the biggest impact, I mean, obviously I learned certain things, but I don't think it's so much what you walk out from the book learning. I don't even know if this is still true at Kellogg. I think it is. It was a lot of teamwork. It was a lot of, we worked in small groups. It was not solo work. So I was constantly being we were, moving into different groups with different people in the class. And that was a great learning experience because you learned how to work with a whole bunch of different people with very different backgrounds, to some degree, different ages, and different work habits. And that was probably my biggest takeaway learning experience, was just understanding how to work effectively with lots of different people with very different work styles, and how to get together to produce a single work product that would be successful. So I think that was probably the most important thing I got from my experience at Kellogg.
The team concept is still thriving and very active in Kellogg, and they're very proud of it for good reasons. We all had teams and built good relationships with them. Mm-hmm. Now, staying on the topic of Kellogg, people often associate business school with businesses, meaning for-profit businesses, whereas nonprofit is a large sector that people do not think about when they think of business school. So, and you mentioned that you had a nonprofit track in your MM. How did you leverage the skill sets from Kellogg, the so-called business school, in the nonprofit world?
Well, I think, first is the obvious that, nonprofits make a profit. I mean, AES's budget when I started was 4.3 million and now it's 12. So, I mean, we've grown. So there is that. So there's certainly lots of truly business decisions that come with the territory. I think probably critical thinking is the most important skill set that I would translate from sort of, traditional business training in business school, is how to look at problems differently, how to think critically about decisions, how to, analyze a problem, think things all the way through to their conclusion, understand what the implications are of different decisions, and, look at them if we do this, if this, and, how you balance those decision processes. I think that's probably one of the larger pieces that I think translates well between for-profit traditional businesses and nonprofits.
Nice. I mean, and as you alluded to, being a nonprofit doesn't mean that nonprofit don't like money. Yeah. It's just that.
Right. It just means it doesn't accrue to any one person's benefit. It accrues to your mission. And I think that I will say that I one of the things I notice when if I hire a staff person who comes from the for-profit traditional business pathway, one of the things they're not really good at is understanding how to work with members and work with a board, because they're used to being in a situation where they get to make the decisions all the time. They aren't accountable to anybody else in that. They're accountable to their own internal structure, and they may be entirely driven by the profit side or the business side. Whereas we're driven by mission outcomes. We always have guidance and input from our members, and they're not our employees. So it's a very different relationship. And I think people transitioning into association management world from traditional business, that's usually the thing they find the hardest. Like, I have to talk to who? There's a committee. Someone has to okay this. And that's a big difference.
Quite interesting.
I think it's a good difference.
And a lot of patients, I think, like I actually had the opportunity to spend some time in the nonprofit world in Washington, D.C. And the numbers, Eileen, you just provided, like having that growth is really very hard in an resource limited environment. Currently, I have been in the for-profit field for almost 6-7 years now at this point. But I first switched from nonprofit to for-profit, I felt like the resources are kind of unlimited for these big corporations coming from a nonprofit background, and creating a growth story like you have done so far, and then the numbers that you the growth percentage that I could just calculate in my mind as you were talking, it's really mind-blowing, and it's really not that easy at all, like in the nonprofit world. So we haven't talked about that aspect much, business, because this podcast is really focused on your leadership journey, and it's about you. But lots of credit goes to that, I think, to your amazing business performance, I will say. It's really impressive. So with that, Eileen, if you could go back in time to the start of your career and give yourself some advice, what would be that? What would that be?
I think it's to trust the path you're on. I had spots off and on early in my career where most of my friends worked for big companies and banks, and where I thought, oh, maybe I maybe I should do that. Maybe I shouldn't be so enamored of working in the arts or of working in nonprofits and with mission-driven organizations. And but I think it was the right path for me. And so, my advice would be just that, trust your gut, trust your path, trust that you're doing, if it seems like the right thing to do, if it seems like the right fit, go with it. Don't worry about what other people are doing or thinking.
That's amazing.
That's a great advice.
As long as you're surviving on it,
Yeah.
But I think too often people get driven by what other people think or what they think they should be doing. I've even counseled some of the people I mentor when they've said, I really love what I do right now. And I'm like, you don't have to move up to the next thing. If you really like what you're doing, it's okay. Do what you're doing. You don't have to become a director if what you really like doing is being a manager. Yeah. As long as you understand the trade-offs that come with that. But, don't feel forced to move into things that aren't right for you.
And trust,
because you won't like it.
Those are gut feeling.
You won't enjoy it. And what the heck is the point of having a job if you hate what you're doing?
Yeah, I think a lot of people actually are in that situation and may not be even actually may not have the self-reflection to understand like how they actually feel. And now, Eileen, how about giving some advice for others, like for people interested in entering your field today? What do you rank as the most important factor to consider for those who are interested in entering your field?
I think one is you can't have a big, huge ego. And I don't mean ego in the positive sense. I mean, everybody should have a positive sense of themselves, but it really is about the mission and the members. And, you're not always going to get credit for everything you do, and that's okay. And you share that. It really is a partnership. And I think so. I think if you're too, if what you achieve is too important to you individually, that's hard. I think aiming for breadth over depth, I think, long term, especially if you're interested in moving up into sort of C-suite levels in nonprofits, it's really helpful to have a broader skill set than necessarily a really, really deep. I know you could be better at certain things than other. I mean, I'm better at marketing and financial stuff than I am at other kinds of things, but I've had roles that cover meetings and research and, all kinds of things. And that, I think that makes you a lot better CEO because you at least understand all the pieces of the business. Don't be afraid to say, jump around a little bit across different areas and associations, whether they're a move up or not. If it's an opportunity to do something new, take that opportunity because it'll serve you well in the long term versus just really focusing on one thing and being really, really good at that. It kind of narrows your options. And then I think people skills, just being really perceptive about how to work with people effectively. As I said, it's you're not only working with staff, but you're working with your board and your entire governance structure and people who are volunteering a whole ton of time on top of very big jobs. So being really, really mindful of that and really understanding how to work well with people is really important as well.
That's amazing advice. And any closing words, questions from you, Kinshuk?
Well, she already said that. She talked about low ego and high impact.
Absolutely, so. Yes. Yeah. You're actually so right. Yes, absolutely. You may know Kellogg's nowadays is super popular in the Kellogg universe, training leaders. Actually, it's right in front of me. I can actually read it, like Kellogg's guiding principles. I think people who are going to be listening to this podcast are actually what Eileen has been talking up until this point is echoing like Kellogg's guiding principles, and allow me to read them. Mm-hmm. Lead with purpose, promote community success, achieve together, and deliver high impact with low ego. I think so far this podcast has been all about like Kellogg's guiding principles.
And I didn't even know that. That's good to know.
Really?
Maybe that's what I took away from Kellogg and I didn't even realize it.
I think
sounds like it.
I think your career journey so far really is a summary of these guiding principles. Eileen, it's been a privilege, an honor to have you on the podcast. I really learned a lot from you today, and I really enjoyed this one. Kinshuk, thank you very much for being with me today. Eileen, any closing words like from you?
No, this was a pleasure, and I hope some of what I shared is helpful to someone.
Absolutely.
This has been a wonderful, I think working for nonprofits is a fabulous career. It's been one of the most rewarding things. I am never sorry that was the path I took.
Thank you for diving deep with us on another episode of Lehigh, Low Ego, High Impact Mindset. Join us every week as we discover the stories, strategies, and insights that will empower you to grow personally and professionally. Stay inspired and catch you in the next one.